everybody, and welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. This is going to be a Season 1 Warband review looking at the Sepulchral Guard. These guys basically used to live in Shadespire and died when Nagash put his curse over the place, and now they kind of live to serve him under the belief that he will eventually free them from their servitude. During this review, I plan to look at the fighter cards, the faction-specific cards, specifically the objective and power cards, and I'm going to be rating this warband, so let's get started. Looking at the fighter cards. This warband has 7 fighters. I've only displayed 5 here because 3 of them are petitioners and they have the exact same fighter card characteristics. We'll start with the Sepulchral Warden, and I've written the errata description of his Inspire ability and his special Summon ability in black, so you guys can see the new updated version. The Sepulchral Warden really stands out by his special ability. If you look at the top right, as an action he could place any friendly fighter that was taken out of action on a starting hex in his territory, and removing all of their wound counters. So essentially he resurrects dead Sepulchral Guard units. In the bottom right, you can see he has another special ability as well, where he can choose 2 friendly fighters that have not moved, and he can move them, and then they just receive move tokens, meaning that they cannot be moved again, but of course they can still be activated to make attack actions, or go on guard, or whatever. And his Inspire condition requires him to have essentially summoned back skeletons twice, and upon coming Inspires, he just becomes better in most ways. His movement improves, his accuracy improves, and his damage improves. And he always has a range to attack, so he's pretty dangerous, albeit very easy to hit with 1 dodge. Next, we have the Prince of Dust, who becomes inspired when he's resurrected, who has very good to hit when inspired, going up to 3 hammers for 2 damage and a knockback 1. And similarly going from 2 movement to 3 movement upon becoming inspired. We have the Harvester, who has a scything attack before and after being inspired, but his scything attack just gets more accurate after he's inspired, and he also increases in his movement. The Champion, my personal favorite, goes from 2 hammers to 3 hammers with Cleave, being very accurate against people who have block defense, doing 2 damage, having 3 move, and of course the fact that all these guys can be resurrected at any point is very nice. And finally we have the Sandbags, the cannon fodder. Although I don't even use them like that, I just put them in the back and hope that no one even approaches them. These are the petitioners. There's 3 of them. They have 3 swords and 1 damage when inspired, and they are essentially the weakest units, only having 2 wounds and doing the least damage of all. So this is the warband, and these are their pros. They have many special combat abilities: scything, cleave, knockback, even before becoming inspired. The Sepulchral Warden has the special abilities to revive units that have been taken out of action, and to march, so to have 2 units make move actions. They have high accuracy when inspired, 3 dice on their attack rolls. And they have a high model number, which means it's very unlikely that you won't have options in terms of activations. But with the pros come the cons. These guys have very low movement, only 2 prior to becoming inspired. And their Inspire mechanic is costly. And by costly, I mean that you have to either spend an activation from the Sepulchral Warden to bring a unit back to life, which means that unit must have been taken out of action, which means your opponent got a glory point for it. Or you could play one of their power cards to bring a unit back to life, but that costs you a power card slot, and also your opponent would have scored glory when your unit got taken out of action. So it's a costly Inspire mechanic, very difficult to inspire many units. They have terrible defense, 1 dodge before and after inspiration, and the high model number also has its negatives in the sense that there are many targets, and many of them are low wounds, which means they can be easy pickings for people trying to collect easy glory off of your units. And most importantly, the success of this warband stems very heavily on the Sepulchral Warden's survivability. So if he gets taken out early, it's very unlikely you're going to be winning any matches with the Sepulchral Guard. So that summarizes the fighter cards. Let's take a look at the objective cards. Starting with the Surge, we have Skills Unforgotten. Score this immediately if your leader takes an enemy fighter out of action, worth 1 glory point. I'm rating this as a B because the Warden's actually very good at taking units out of action when he's inspired. He has 3 hammers, 3 damage, he has reach, so he can cover 2 hexes. But the problem is you don't really want your Sepulchral Warden to engage units in combat because then he becomes vulnerable, and the moment he's taken out, it's pretty likely you're not going to be winning the game. So I gave it a B because this is not a strong strategy to try to lead with your leader. And that's actually the only score immediately card these guys have. We're going to look into the score in the end phase cards. starting with Battle Without End, and I've included the errata, which reads, score this in an end phase if one or more friendly fighters returned to the battlefield in the preceding action phase, and a friendly fighter had already returned to the battlefield in that phase. So basically, if you bring 2 guys back to life in the same round, you get a glory point in the end phase. I'm giving this a B because it's okay. I mean, it's likely to happen, but the fact that it's only worth 1 glory and you only get it in the end phase makes it not super worthwhile. And obviously, if it's your strategy to just resurrect units, that's a pretty losing strategy, because if you're resurrecting them, it means they're getting taken out of action, which means your opponent's getting glory points for killing them. Claim the city. Score this in an end phase if you hold every objective, worth 5 glory points. I'm only giving this a C because there's always 5 objective tokens on the board in a 2-player game, and these guys don't have any cards that allow them to remove objective tokens, which means covering all 5 can be pretty tricky. You have only 7 units, a lot of them have low wounds, they all have bad defense, so this is really hard to pull off. Fervent Petition. Score this in an end phase if 3 friendly petitioners are surviving and inspired, worth 3 glory points. That's a D. The strategy of letting your petitioners die and then specifically spending your activations resurrecting your petitioners is a losing strategy because they're garbage units. You want to focus on your champion and your prince. Those guys are badass. Even your harvester, he's good. Petitioners, I mean, I wouldn't want to waste many activations of bringing them back to life unless I just really needed units. We have March of the Dead. Score this in an end phase if all your surviving fighters, at least 5, made a move action in the preceding action phase, worth 2 glory. I'm giving this an A. It allows the Sepulchral Guard to score some passive glory. Very nice if you draw it in the first round. You can have your Sepulchral Warden make 2 units move 3 times and then move himself, so that would be 7 moves. Meanwhile, they can move and cover objective tokens, getting you glory points for covering objective tokens. You only need 5 to pull it off, so it's possible that if 2 of your units are out of action, you only have to spend 3 activations doing this, so it's pretty good. More Able Bodies. Score this in an end phase if your warband took 2 or more enemy fighters out of action in the preceding action phase, worth 1 glory. I'm giving this a C because killing 2 units to get 1 glory in an end phase just isn't very good. Undead Swarm. Score this in an end phase if each enemy fighter is adjacent to at least 2 friendly fighters, worth 1. I'm ranking this as a D. This is a very difficult card to pull off because it's very unrealistic to get 2 friendly fighters adjacent to each enemy fighter. So that's the end of the score in the end phase cards. Now we're going to look at the score in the third end phase cards, and there's 3 of them. There's Fearless in Death. Score this in the third end phase if there is only 1 friendly fighter on the battlefield, worth 1. I'm giving this a D. I mean, any third end phase card worth 1 is just not worth taking. Fearless General. Score this in the third end phase if you have 4 or more surviving fighters and none are inspired, worth 3 glory. I'm also giving this a D because the main tactic that the Sepulchral Guard use is when their units die, they resurrect them, because that's the whole mechanic that gives them any kind of advantage over other warbands. And when your units get resurrected, they become inspired. So to have a play style in which you're specifically trying not to resurrect units, so that at the end you have only uninspired units, I mean, there's too many things, there's too many factors working against you to try to pull this thing off. Plus it's scoring the third end phase, so that's a D. Finally, we have the Invigorated Dead. Score this in the third end phase if all of your surviving friendly fighters are inspired, at least 3. I mean, this is the complete opposite of the previous card, and it's only worth 1 glory point, so you have to have all your fighters inspired, which is hard to pull off, so this is also going to be worth a D. So, just to summarize the general function of this warband's objective cards, they promote having the leader attack, they promote returning units to the battlefield, they promote not returning units to the battlefield, they promote moving units, swarming enemies, and covering objectives. Next, we're going to look at this faction's power cards. Starting with their ploys, we have Bone Shrapnel. Reaction. Play this after an attack action that takes a friendly fighter out of action. The fighter that took them out of action suffers 1 damage. I'm giving this a B. I mean, it's pretty good. It's not limited by range, so if you get taken out by a ranged attack, they take a damage, and then you can just bring your unit back to life, so it works very good with the Sepulchral Guard. We have Ceaseless Attacks. Play this after a friendly fighter's attack action. Make an attack action with another friendly fighter. I'm giving this an A because if you plan accordingly and you get your units adjacent to enemy fighters, you take a swing, all of a sudden another unit takes a swing as well. This just gives you a free out-of-turn attack, which is nice for any warband. Clawing Hands. Each friendly fighter that is not on the battlefield is considered to be supporting the first attack action in the next activation. I'm giving this a B because it gives you an extra bonus to hit if some of your units are out of action, which is pretty likely to be the case. Dance Macabre. Any friendly fighters that make a move action the next activation can move 1 additional hex. I'm giving this an A because with the Sepulchral Warden's ability to move 2 units, it basically gives 2 units a +1 move, which could bring your 3 movement to a 4 movement, or your 2 movement to a 3 movement, which can make a big difference for this warband because their movement's pretty terrible. Grasping Hands. Reduce the move characteristic of the first fighter to be activated in the next activation by the number of friendly fighters that are not on the battlefield to a minimum of 0. I'm giving this a C because it affects the movement of a fighter in the next activation, which means it kind of puts the power in your opponent's hands. Maybe they'll just decide not to move, maybe they'll take an attack, maybe they'll guard, maybe they'll draw a power card. It's also contingent on you not having fighters on the battlefield. And if you're playing against a warband that has a lot of movement, then you have to have a lot of fighters out of action for this to really be valuable and to really impede them. We have Restless Dead. Place a friendly fighter that was taken out of action, other than the Sepulchral Warden, on a starting hex in your territory. This is the S card for this warband. It's the best card in their deck. They get to just get a free summon, which comes with a free inspiration. Spectral Form. Any friendly fighters that make a move action in the next activation can move through other fighters, but must end their moves in empty hexes. I'm giving this a C, only because their movement is not very good, so although it will give them a bit of a movement bonus if they can move through other fighters, it's not a huge bonus to movement, and they can't move through blocked hexes or lethal hexes without taking damage, so it's not such an excellent card. Swift Evasion. Choose 1 friendly fighter and push them up to 2 hexes. Their new position must be further away from all enemies. I'm giving this a B. I mean, it's a good way for the Sepulchral Warden to try to get out of harm's way, but I mean, the fact that you specifically have to move away from enemy units can make this card useless in many situations. Terrifying Screams. Choose 1 enemy fighter and push them 1 hex. It's a faction-specific distraction. It's worth an A. It's a good card. We have the Necromancer Commands. Reaction. Play this after a friendly fighter's attack action that fails. Make the attack action again. So it just helps you land a hit that you missed. Very useful. It's getting an A. And that is all the ploys this warband has. And just to summarize, these cards in general promote causing damage, having extra opportunities to attack, reviving, moving friendly and enemy fighters, hindering enemy movement, avoiding combat, and improving the accuracy of attacks. Finally, we're going to be looking at its upgrade cards, starting with Ancient Commander, and I've written the errata version in black on this card. So as an action, the Sepulchral Warden can choose 3 other friendly fighters that have no move or charge tokens. They can make 1 move action with each of the chosen fighters. So it's basically the Sepulchral Warden's normal movement action, where he can make other fighters move, but instead of 2 fighters, he can move 3 fighters. I'm giving this an A because if it's equipped, it just makes an ability that he's definitely going to be using much better. We have Assume Command, restricted to the Prince. Each friendly fighter that supports this fighter is considered to be 2 supporting fighters. I'm giving this a C because it's only relevant to the Prince, but I mean, I'd be willing to move it to a B potentially, because if you have a fighter supporting the Prince, it gives him a 3 hammer attack when inspired with full support, which is actually really high odds of being successful. We have Deathly Charge, restricted to the Champion. This fighter's attack actions with a range of 1 or 2 have +1 damage in a phase in which they make a charge action. I'm giving this a C just because Great Strength is better. It's not restricted to any particular unit. It's not restricted to charge actions. What is an exceptional card, though, is the Champion's Fatal Strike. So as a reaction, you can make this attack action 2 hammers for 2 damage during an attack action that takes this fighter out of action before they're removed from the battlefield, and you could target the attacker. So this is an A. It's a very good card because if you plan to continue to resurrect your champion and put him in harm's way, it makes him a scary target to actually take a swing at. Focused attack for the Harvester, 2 hammers, 2 damage. On crits, it has Cleave. I'm giving this a C because if you're playing the Harvester and you're leading with the Harvester, you tend to want to aim for that scything attack. Otherwise, you might as well just go with the Champion or the Prince. And if they die, you can just resurrect them anyway, so I don't see much need to put this equipment on your Harvester at all. Frightening Speed, +2 move to all your more important units. That's an S. They have really bad move. You can go from 3 to 5 movement with your Champion, your Harvester, your Prince, which makes them pretty scary because then they can attack most units on the battlefield. Grim Cleave for the Harvester gives him Cleave. I'm giving that a C. I mean, it's nice to give him Cleave, but it's restricted to the Harvester. Lethal Lunge for the Warden, a 2-range attack with 2 hammers and 3 damage with Cleave. So main perk is that it has Cleave, but it actually has a lower 2 hit with only 2 hammers instead of 3 for the Inspired Warden. So I'm giving this a C. I would just stick with his basic attack. Remembered Shield. change the defense characteristic to a block for the Warden, the Prince, the Petitioners. This is a D because if anything, one block is often worse than one dodge because cleave is all over the place. They only get one dice regardless, so it's not a worthwhile card at all. Undying, +1 wounds, that's always useful. I'm giving it an A. Finally, Warden's Call. As an action, you can choose 2 friendly fighters other than your leader and put them on guard with your Warden. I'm giving this a C because it's okay. It's nice not to be able to get driven back, but I mean, with the 1 defense die for all of your fighters, being on guard doesn't make a huge difference. They're probably going to take the damage anyway, and with their low to medium wounds, they're probably going to die. So that's all the upgrades. Just to summarize, these upgrades typically promote increasing damage, having extra opportunities to attack, improving movement, improving defense, improving the accuracy of attacks, increasing wounds, and providing some unexceptional weapon upgrades. And here's a final summary of all the rankings that I gave to all these cards. So as you can see, the objective cards are pretty unexceptional. Most of their cards are D ranking. They have 1 that's A, 0 that are S. However, their gambits are pretty nice. 4 A tier cards, 1 S tier card, 3 B tier cards. Pretty solid. And upgrades, I mean, they have a few that are very nice, but the majority are not so great. So those are the fighter cards. Those are all the faction-specific cards. We've reviewed all of them. Let's rate this warband as a whole. So to summarize, in our overview, we can see that the Sepulchral Guard have a good combination of movement, special attack options, and power cards, which makes them very versatile. The Sepulchral Warden can make 2 units move. He can summon back units that have been taken out of action. They have good power cards. They are pretty good at being aggressive, pretty good at holding objectives. They have a good versatility. They have a difficult Inspire mechanic, and the reviving costs action, so it's unlikely to get the maximum use out of all units. So even though your units do improve pretty significantly when they're inspired, it's pretty unlikely that all of your units are going to get inspired in this game. You're probably going to choose a select few and revive them, and then afterward you won't really want to risk spending extra actions to do so. There is a heavy reliance on the leader, and the leader has poor defense, which means this warband can be crippled easily. So a well-timed attack from the enemy on your leader can just shut this warband down completely. With the Thorns of the Briar Queen and the Sudden Appearance card, I mean, I've had my Sepulchral Warden get wiped out in the second activation of a game on more than one occasion. So need to protect that leader, and it's not always super easy to do so. Also, they have some hard to score objective cards. Their objective cards are pretty bad, which means they're completely reliant on the current meta with regards to scoring glory points. But because they're versatile, I mean, if the meta promotes holding objectives or clustering or certain things like that, like it does right now, this warband can be pretty strong. But in certain other metas, they can be pretty weak. They're really reliant on those universal cards for objectives. So when I look at all these things together, I'm going to have to give these guys a rank of B. They fall somewhere in the middle. They're definitely not top tier. They're not garbage. They can be pretty good in a meta, but they can also be pretty bad in a meta, and they rely on those universal cards. So that's my ranking for the Sepulchral Guard. So if you have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe. And next video, I'll be talking about how we can balance this warband by providing errata to change their existing rules and providing new faction-specific cards to upgrade them to help bring them to a level where they can be more competitive against some of the stronger warbands. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.